Tonight we gather for a special conversation that is not only about archaeology or diplomacy, but about something much deeper, the battle for identity, and our two speakers tonight are going to convince us, a battle for the future of Western civilization itself. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Doron Spielman and Ambassador Mike Huckabee.
We are here at the National Library in Jerusalem, where all of the texts have come together that speak the history of the Jewish people. I cannot think of a better place to welcome Ambassador Huckabee to join me on stage with Eylon Levy to discuss the indigenous roots of the Jewish people that I talk about in my book, When the Stones Speak. And nothing shows us more than the city of David with the archaeology that proves that we are the most indigenous people in the world.
Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eylon Levy, and it is a pleasure to welcome all of you here in the capital of modern Jerusalem for a special conversation about the capital of ancient Jerusalem. And by ancient Jerusalem, I don't mean the walled-off square kilometer down the road that we call the old city of Jerusalem, because that was practically a modern extension of the real old city of Jerusalem that is going to ground our discussion tonight. I mean, of course, the city of David, the biblical capital of ancient Israel, just outside Suleiman the Magnificent's relatively modern ancient old city walls. Tonight we gather for a special conversation that is not only about archaeology or diplomacy, but about something much deeper, the battle for identity, and our two speakers tonight are going to convince us, a battle for the future of Western civilization itself. Tonight we're joined by two extraordinary voices who sit at the crossroads of that story. Doron Spielman is the New York Times best-selling author. Still getting used to that accolade, aren't you? New York Times best-selling author of When the Stones Speak, which tells the story of what may well be one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the 21st century, the Pilgrims Road in the city of David. A reminder that long before Israel was a modern state, before it had tanks or treaties or borders, it had a story rooted on a tiny ridge of earth, where a shepherd king built his capital 3,000 years ago, and a capital that was already ancient history by the time that King Herod built a monumental passageway all the way from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount to carry the thousands, millions of Jewish pilgrims who arrived 3 times a year. We're also very proud to be joined tonight by the Honorable Mike Huckabee, Ambassador. Ambassador of the United States of America to Israel, as if you need an introduction, a man who holds Jerusalem in his heart as much as Jerusalem holds him in its heart. Ambassador Huckabee spoke at the official inauguration of the City of David Pilgrimage Road alongside Secretary Rubio. And there is something profoundly moving and profoundly symbolic about an American ambassador inaugurating the road that once carried our ancestors towards the temple. Because the story of America is also, in many ways, a biblical story. It begins with a covenant, purpose, and a moral mission, a story that begins right here, or rather just down the road in ancient Jerusalem. So tonight we're going to explore a supposedly simple question with monumental consequences. Why does the future of the city of David matter, not only to Israel, but to Western civilization itself? Because this place is not just an archaeological curiosity, it is the physical proof of the Jewish people's origin story. It is the anchor of our indigeneity in the land of Israel, and it is the foundation on which both Israel and, in a very real sense, America have both built their modern identities. And precisely for that reason, the city of David has been relentlessly attacked with increasingly feverish attempts to deny and erase Jewish history in this land and in this city. And so the battle over the city of David is not just a local dispute, it is a civilizational struggle over memory, over whether nations still believe that history and even ancient archaeology, whether they still matter in the present day. So tonight we begin here with the stones, with the story, and with the question of what the quest to uncover the people of Israel's ancient history in the land of Israel means for the world at this critical moment. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Doron Spielman and Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Why does the city of David matter as more than just a tourist attraction? Why does it really matter for Western civilization itself.
Thank you, Eylon. And first of all, thank you to all of the incredible people that came tonight to dedicate yourself to understanding this important topic. And I especially want to say thank you to Ambassador Huckabee as a person who traveled the paths of the city of David for 2 decades. There is probably no other person that ever visited the site of stature that I looked up to more than you, Ambassador Huckabee. And when I heard you speak, I often said, and I'm not alone, one day maybe we'll learn to speak like Ambassador Mike Huckabee. You know, Eylon, one of the main reasons why I think that the city of David is so central to the West is because every person needs a calling. Every person ultimately is searching for meaning. And what does it mean, meaning? We live on a day where it's the iPhone, the iPad, this is instantaneous. It's a text that comes across your phone. People are searching for something deeper, a calling. And I think society's largely built maybe to let us forget about that feeling. And when you walk through the city of David, the remarkable thing, whether you're Jewish or Christian, or most recently, the Commerce Secretary of India, who's Hindu. And I asked Nir Barkat, I said, why was he so blown away? And he said, well, when I took him to the city of David, he said, we're both old people. And he felt a real sense of belonging. And that place is under attack. You mentioned it in your introduction. I can't think of another archaeological site in the world that has faced as much violence, so much discreditation, press that was aligned against it for one reason. There are forces in the world that want us to forget that that beginning, that calling, is really in Jerusalem and has its foundation in the Bible. And when you have that, it can either be unbelievable or it can be explosive. And for that reason, we need to look no further than what our enemies attacked to know what is most important for us.
And Ambassador Huckabee, I gather, of course, that the city of David is very close to your heart, not only because you spoke at the inauguration of the Pilgrims Road, but recently when the Vice President and Secretary of State came to visit Israel, they were only on the ground for a few hours, and one of the sites they went to was the city of David. So I'm wondering, why was it so important for you that America's foremost leaders come to visit the city of David when they're only on the ground very briefly?
What you said in the introduction was very, very accurate, that America's history is actually tied to the city of Jerusalem. A lot of Americans never think about it, but if there had not been a calling of God to Abraham in this city, and then the establishment of the Jewish faith here with the temple and the reality of God's creating a people, a place, and a purpose, had that not happened, there would be no Western civilization. And without Western civilization, there would be no America. Our own history is rooted in the Judeo-Christian foundation. The city of David validates, historically, everything that is an ideological and a theological belief. When people think about it, history is to a culture what memory is to the individual, which means that if I woke up tomorrow and I couldn't remember who I am, why I was here, where I lived, if I had no memory of my past, I would be lost and filled with confusion and chaos. A culture that does not know its history is lost, chaotic, and in the dark. If you want to explain darkness in the world today and chaos and disorder, it's because people don't know who they are. They don't have a sense of their history. The city of David gives people, not just Jewish people, but certainly Jewish people, an understanding of its history. 3,000 years ago, King David created this amazing place that we take for granted now, but it's still, in my mind, the most enchanting, the most incredible city on the earth. And it's so filled with the treasure of just the history of this land and the people that God chose to live here. The reason there's been so much animosity toward it is because people can argue ideas and they can debate them. You cannot argue the archaeology, which is a scientific uncovering of that which once was. It is perhaps the single most important archaeological discovery in all of history because it is so extensive, And it so completely reveals what really happened here. For the Jewish people, it's going back to the time of King David. For Christians, it's certainly to the time of Jesus 2,000 years ago. But the discoveries in the city of David really make it clear that, as Doron's book says, the stones really do speak and they cry out. So even if the voices of humanity are silenced, the stones themselves are speaking to us, and they tell us the story of what happened here. I just find it the most remarkable place. My wife, I think, is perhaps even a more fanatical fan of the city of David than I am. She regularly does the zip line anytime somebody comes to town. She always wants to make sure they go to the wet tunnels and the Hezekiah tunnels. And, she's such an adventurer when it comes to the city of David that I honestly have told Zev over there, I said, I think you need to hire my wife as a tour guide because I think she knows about as much about it as he does, and he knows everything there is to know about it. But I just
Doron,
marvel.
this appointment is very important for the future of the U.S.-Israel relationship now.
But it's a joy to be able to go there to see it and to take people whose eyes just bug out of their heads when they understand what they're looking at and where they're walking. It is a miraculous discovery.
Doron, it really is remarkable that whereas there have never been archaeological excavations on the Temple Mount itself, you have excavations just down the road that are revealing a history so much more ancient than the Second Temple, or even the First Temple, predating the First Temple. And the stones really do speak for themselves. The monumental discovery of what would have been a palace from King David's period, long before the Pilgrims Road. And I wonder if you could talk about some of the backlash that the city of David has experienced from actors who don't want the stones to speak for themselves, and why you think that backlash has been so severe.
I think the backlash takes two different forms. There's the physical form, the violence that took place in the city of David, and then there's the attempt to silence this throughout the world. The most poignant, clear example is the discovery of the Siloam pool, of the Shiloh pool. When we discovered the pool, there was a water main that broke, in fact, a sewage main. It dumped sewage into the valley. We did not know that there was a pool in this area of the city of David, and I went out there with Davidale, who is the founder of the city of David, and Yehuda Mali, the co-founder, and we saw the sewage spilling out, and a tractor had uncovered a stair beneath the sewage, and that was what gave us an insight that there was a pool. However, that wasn't, if there was just a pool, we would have been okay. The issue is that the archaeologist, Professor Ronnie Reich, said this is not a pool. This is a mikvah, a ritual bath for the temple. The problem is that it's 7 football fields away from the temple. And this is where he said, look, if people were purifying themselves here, they must have had a road to walk up. And that's when we began to sense that there was a pilgrimage road. And the first crawl, by the way, to find the pilgrimage road was not on the road itself. It was a water tunnel that went underneath the road. And I was one of the 5 people that crawled there, scared out of my mind. I tell it in the book. Plenty of therapy afterwards to get me over claustrophobia. And over our heads, we saw the stairs of the pool, the stairs of the road. And it was unbelievable. We were under the ground. And it was at that moment that 2 things happened. The first thing is we found the pots the jugs that were full of the remainders of food. On that crawl, we could see the pots, and the rim was lined with looked to be a chalky substance. Later, scientists confirmed it was food because the last Jews in Jerusalem had died in this tunnel. The second thing that happened is we came out, and when word got out the next day, all of the workers of the city of David did not show up for work. And we were not sure why. But we quickly found out on the telephone poles of the city of David, there were names written in Arabic, and they were the names of every worker in the city of David. And that was the threat that came to stop the site because they understood something we didn't. We called the Pilgrimage Road a way up to the Temple Mount. They understood that this is competition for the Hajj, for the actual pilgrimage of the Muslims to Mecca, which it shouldn't be because Jerusalem's not on the Hajj. But if you have Jews that have a Hajj, Christians that are joining them in the millions. The ambassador just had 1,200 pastors that sent out a message to millions of people. Imagine millions of Jews and Christians walking up on the actual road itself, like the ambassador and you said, you cannot deny that we are the indigenous people to the area. That became the bullseye, and they did everything they could to throw arrows and bullets and words at that target.
And Ambassador Huckabee, it's clear that the importance of the city of David for grounding the Jewish people's story in the land of Israel, but you've also spoken about the importance of the city of David to establishing the notion of Judeo-Christian heritage. And that sense of Judeo-Christian heritage is central to your understanding as being a Christian Zionist, and yet that's something that is perhaps increasingly becoming a fault line within the United States itself. I wonder if you could address the importance of the city of David as a symbol of Judeo-Christian civilization and heritage in shoring up support for the state of Israel among Christians in the United States when there are voices that would like to unplug Israel from the United States.
Well, I think it's very important when you hear people, especially on the left, and they say, you know, trust the science, follow the science. Well, archaeology is science. And if anyone ever wanted to really follow the science and trust the science, you cannot deny the archaeological miracle of the city of David. What I consider to be this extraordinary revelation, think about the fact that it was hidden for 2,000 years, underground, unknown, people living their lives on top of it, streets and roads and houses being built above it, nobody understanding that underneath here is maybe the greatest archaeological discovery in history. Why was it 2,000 years? Because we needed to discover it now at a time when there's so much skepticism, so much anti-Semitism, so much animosity toward the Bible and to the people who follow it. And this is this discovery where it's not that we are arguing with people over who believes what. There's no argument. This is a reality. And so what we have with the city of David is this incredible, miraculous discovery. There's an interesting fact that I was told by a leading archaeologist many years ago. He said there has never been an archaeological discovery that controverted one verse of Scripture. You think about how powerful that is. Archaeology continually validates the Scripture. And when people say, you know, the Bible was a fine book of teaching and stories and fables, but it really wasn't true. Archaeology continues to tell us, oh, it's true all right. It's historically accurate. It's a historical account of God moving in this world and showing his purpose throughout history. It is an ongoing process, and that's why it does frighten those who want to reject the one true God. That's why it becomes so important, and it's why we need to embrace it, turn the lights on, let everybody see it, come visit it, and revel in its miracle.
And I certainly hope that the beautiful images of Vice President Vance visiting the city of David and together with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre will encourage a new wave of Christian tourism from the United States to Israel. Doron, you used the word indigeneity earlier. And I think that we have only started using the word indigeneity in response to a movement out there that has sought to deny the Jewish people's connections to the land of Israel at all. For so long it was so obvious, and it was part of the League of Nations mandate, just so obvious that the Jewish people were native to the land of Israel that it didn't need much elaboration. But the Palestinian movement has ridden that language of indigeneity to claim they're the indigenous people and that Israelis are foreign interlopers. And that's part of the reason why there has been so much pushback to the city of David, because it completely undermines their claim that they were here first when you show that there was such ancient Jewish history underneath their feet. And I wonder whether you think that, as we look ahead now, perhaps to expanding the circle of peace in Israel and hopefully putting this horrible war behind us, it is possible to have any sort of real lasting peace with our neighbors, nearer to home, further away, without accepting that principle that the Jewish people are indigenous to the land of Israel and they are native here. Is it possible to reach any sort of peace agreement that tries to fudge that point that the Jewish people have returned home?
That is an excellent question, and it's something that I've thought about a lot, and I'm glad. I hope you'll also ask the ambassador that question next. You know, we are or used to be great storytellers. The Jewish people are great. I'm Spielman, right? So I'm also trying to tell a story, but we used to be, once upon a time, great storytellers. We've told the story of the Exodus, and it has reverberated throughout the entire world. That vision of the Exodus has inspired African Americans, inspired the Americans. The founding fathers of America held that dear and spoke Hebrew. However, there is a story that we have failed to tell, and it is the story of our return to Israel. Somehow, we have taken the greatest story on earth, and we don't tell it. We don't tell that we've returned to Israel not because of the Balfour Declaration, as blessed as it is, and not because of the 1948 war where we battled against all these armies, and not even so that we could be the startup nation. We started up 3,000 years ago, by the way, right? We're the startup nation from 1800 BC, 4,000 years ago. I don't know if it's because of the exile. I don't know if it's because we were chased from place to place, people without a land, that we're almost uncomfortable speaking of ourselves as natives to this land. But there's always been Jews in this land. We speak the same language. We have the same DNA that brings us back to this land. And who else can go beneath the ground and uncover a clay seal that says on it, Yuchal, the son of Shlemiah, from the palace of King David, which is the minister in the court of Zedekiah, the last king that ruled in Jerusalem, that is written in the book of Jeremiah in Hebrew. If that's not indigeneity, I don't know what is. And so I believe, Eylon, that as a nation, and you are a great spokesman for this nation. You have given thousands of interviews. I've maybe given 100. And we've battled this war. And with all the other spokespeople, at the end of the day, after we're done speaking, the other side, the Gazan side, the Palestinian side, whatever you want to call it, has one answer. Okay, you stole our land. And all of our claims fall flat on their face. If we cannot answer the claim that we stole their land, it's like going out for a baseball game with a football. We're on the wrong field. We need to bring back the indigenous argument, own it, and keep it in order for us to be able to show Jews and non-Jews the truth that we are justified in being here, historically, morally, and spiritually.
It's funny. We're about to celebrate Hanukkah, and it's extraordinary to read in the book of Maccabees that they were fighting exactly the same claims, where Simon Thassi says, I want to rebut the allegations that we've stolen someone else's land. We're simply taking back our ancestors' inheritance that was at one point unjustly taken from us. And thank you to the Christians for saving the book of Maccabees for us, because we forgot that one. Ambassador, the Abraham Accords are an extraordinary development. I think President Trump should have won that Nobel Peace Prize the first time. And they were extraordinary not just because they established diplomatic relations between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, but also because they included this text and they committed these three Arab states to the statement that the Arab and Jewish peoples are descendants of a common ancestor, Abraham. And it's a text that implicitly, but inescapably, commits those countries to accepting that the Jewish people are indeed indigenous or native to this region. And I wonder whether you think that it's time now for the Abraham Accords countries to explicitly recognize and acknowledge that the Jewish people are native to the land of Israel.
It would be a big improvement in bringing a better understanding of reality and peace to the world. I think it's important that we understand that the Bible itself is the most important book to give validity to the idea that the Jewish people are indigenous to the land. It really started with the title deed. You might say the Bible is a great legal document. It is a contract. It is really a title deed. If you go to Genesis 12, where God explicitly says to Abraham, this is the land that I'm giving you. I'm making with you a covenant. And that covenant is unbreakable. God will never break that covenant. And that's why people ask me sometimes, look, you're not even Jewish, you're Christian. Why is it you believe in the land of Israel and the Jewish people? I said, because I believe the Bible. And if the Bible says God made a covenant with the Jewish people, that is an unbreakable covenant. So I don't try to argue about it. I receive it, respect it, and I'm grateful for it because it is the foundation and the roots of my own faith. Without that Jewish faith, I don't have a faith. You can have a Jewish faith without a Christian connection. You cannot have a Christian faith without the Jewish connection. So when I look at the scriptures and I see what God said, and then I see that he said it not in the context of philosophy. God did not send a lot of philosophers to give us some very thoughtful ideas. He put it all in historical context. So when he meets Abraham on Mount Moriah, we know where Mount Moriah is. When King David comes to this city that becomes what we call the city of David, but Jerusalem, this is a real place. And it has had ongoing, continual, linear history for over 3,000 years. If we're talking about the Pilgrim pathway, we're talking about a place that people walked 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, up to the Temple Mount, and it's now been uncovered, but it uncovered something that has always been there. So it's not like they built an amusement park so everybody could come and see, oh, this is what it would have been like. No, this isn't what it would have been like. This is what it is then, now, and forever. And that is the irrefutable, indisputable validation of this being the Jewish homeland. And I think for all of us, whether we're Jewish or not, it's a matter of accepting the reality and embracing it. And doing so, I think, sets us free and gives us the capacity to say, isn't God amazing? That a God from 3,800 years ago who put in motion this whole process, including this city, is still the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it is still a history that is being told in the stories, which I love that, Doron, that's beautiful, because it is the story of life. It is the story of God acting in this world, injecting himself into our stories and making our stories worth living.
And that's it's a beautiful articulation of your relationship as a Christian to Israel, grounding that in the ancient Jewish history in this land. And yet one gets the impression that so much of Arab and Islamic identity in the region is still based on a kind of supersessionism, on saying, we came here, we replaced Judaism, the Jews were never here before us. And I wonder, therefore, if one of the biggest obstacles to peace in the region is the Palestinians' continued adherence to the myth that the Jews are not indigenous, that they're colonial, that therefore one day with the application of enough violence they will pack up and leave. That's why they still cite the Algeria model. That the path to peace goes through disabusing them of this notion that Israel is temporary. The way to disabuse them of the notion that Israel is temporary is to get them to accept that the Jews are native. And therefore I'm wondering, how do we transform the Abraham Accords from an implicit statement that recognizes the Jewish people's indigeneity into the Arab world, forcing the Palestinians to confront the reality that the Jews have native ancient roots in this land? Because I think that unlocks the path to peace.
I would agree with you, and I do believe that everyone has to come to the conclusion that we are not threatened because God made a covenant with the Jews. Why would I be threatened by that? I don't feel like somehow that diminishes me as a human being. It only gives me a sense that if God would keep a promise that he has kept for 3,800 years, what an amazing reality that is for me, that if I also believe in his promises, I believe he will keep those promises to me as well. Rather than to reject the idea that this is the land that God gave the Jews, I think we all, no matter who we are, we should embrace it and accept it and recognize that receiving that truth is our own pathway to a relationship with the creator of the universe. What an amazing thing that we not only are capable of having a relationship with the creation. I can touch a tree, I can dig in the dirt and put a seed and it turns into a plant. I can see the water and be refreshed by it and pull a fish from it. I'm connected to the creation. But what really is the miracle is not that I have a connection to the creation. It's that through faith, I have a connection to the creator that created the creation, that doesn't threaten me, it fulfills me. And the more we can embrace that, the more we have meaning in life. Doron mentioned that word meaning. That's where it comes from, that I know the Creator. And the creation that He made is just evidence of who He is.
Doron, not everyone sees things quite as Ambassador Huckabee does.
I wish they did.
And in the hundreds of interviews you've given to the foreign press, it's not 100, don't be coy, both in your capacity with the IDF spokesperson's unit and through some of the work that we've done together for the media, you've been on the front lines of the relentless information assault against Israel, in which that perception of the Jewish people being native, indigenous to this land, is not self-evident to many people who have fallen down the rabbit hole of viewing the Jews as foreign colonial interlopers. I'm wondering, how do you explain that? Why do the stones not speak for themselves? And perhaps in some of the media work you did around the city of David, not the war, you were very active in the media long before that. What sort of reactions and skepticism and hostility did you have so that the stones might have tried to speak, but some people were sticking their fingers in their ears?
You know, I think it's happening on both sides. There are two groups of people that are afraid to talk about this indigenous connection that the ambassador so beautifully and I think even naturally speaks about from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And hearing it from the ambassador, I think probably for most of us here, we don't speak that way enough. There is some type of blockage, so we're afraid. When we do manage to speak it, the press, much of the international press, does everything they can to stop it. I'll give you an example. When we uncovered those seals I was talking about in King David's palace, so that was groundbreaking for the city of David, and all of a sudden we were on the cover of the New York Times, and people began flooding to the city of David, and one of them was Leslie Stahl. Leslie Stahl from 60 Minutes. And Leslie Stahl comes from 60 Minutes and did a well-known interview with me, a younger version of me. I had more hair, but hopefully I have a little bit more wisdom now. Not to give her 6.5 hours with me. That was the first mistake.
You get 60 minutes, lady.
Exactly. So Leslie Stahl came, and she said before the interview, she said, you know, would you give a tour to my husband and I? We only have about 45 minutes, but I've never brought my husband on a film shoot. He asked to come to this one. So I take her and her husband through the city of David. We do the overlook. And then we go into King David's palace, and I had the seals brought to show her. Her husband was crying. Leslie was beside herself. And then the cameras began rolling for the interview. And it was like wind came and dried the tears off her face. Sand pulled any emotion away. And in that entire interview, there was nothing about the Jewish people being indigenous, about the seals, about anything. The entire interview was about some Arab from the village that was part of an organization getting European funding that said that our excavations were undermining their homes. And, you know, afterwards I sat with Davidala and we said, was it worth it? Was it not worth it? And it just became so clear to me, and I said to him, you know why she can't acknowledge what she sees? Because she is absolutely committed to the division of Jerusalem. What's she going to say to her viewers? That the city of David is in East Jerusalem that's going to be given away? And so even the moments...
Right, it'll be a major tourist attraction in the state of Palestine.
Exactly, it would be. I don't think much of it would be left. It'd be interesting to think about what it becomes. Dawood's palace would maybe stay. But I think that even when we do manage, there's a major blockage on the other side. Until, truthfully, President Trump came into power in 2016, and now again, in 2024, this is the moment where you see the world is beginning to accept this. And I think for us, when we have ambassadors like Ambassador Huckabee, these are the 4 years we need to learn to speak. We need to speak openly about the covenant that we've received, even when they're asking us military questions. We have to talk about defending our ancestral land. We have to call it our ancestral land. Wouldn't anyone defend their ancestral land? Again and again and again, because our enemies, those who face us, who've tried to destroy our narrative, it didn't begin yesterday. We fell asleep at the wheel. They've been doing this for 80 years. They've been telling a story. Much of it is not based on fact. There's a grain of fact. Most of it's not based on fact. And it has become, in the world, accepted fact. We have got to begin the fight to talk about our truth and not be afraid.
Mr. Ambassador, I think you've probably been in Israel long enough to have heard people complaining that Israel sucks at PR. And so I wonder, when we look at polls and see an erosion of support for Israel, identification with Israel, it can come in tandem with, especially among the youth, growing support for Hamas, which is terrifying. How do you think that Israel can do a better job of telling this story of the return to our ancestral homeland, the story of the Jewish people's native connection, and using that to ground identification and support among Americans, among religious audiences, but not just? How does Israel make diplomatic hay, so to speak, of sites like the City of David to combat the relentless information war that led, for example, Leslie Stahl to be so committed to the notion that Jerusalem must be divided that she wouldn't let the stones speak for themselves?
Let me first address it from sort of a high level, the 35,000 feet in the air flyover.
Air Force One level.
Air Force One flyover, yes. From the big picture, I would say that the best friend Israel has is truth. Truth is your friend. Tell it and expose people to the truth. Last week, we saw a real miracle. Over 1,000 evangelical pastors from the United States came to Israel. I was telling the Foreign Minister, Gideon Sa'ar, I said, you do realize that it's not just that 1,000 pastors are here, but they represent and speak to millions of Americans every single week through their congregations, through their social media, through YouTube. So the multiplication of these pastors coming and seeing, most of whom were here for the very first time, overwhelmed with the sense that they are walking the pages of the Bible. And when they went to Shiloh, they were exposed to the fact that 80% of the Bible happened in Judea and Samaria. They became acquainted with the City of David. They recognized that there's really a valid physical history in this land that dates all the way back to the time of King David. There is extraordinary validation. So that's the big picture. The small picture is we have to take the tools that are available to us today. Social media is destroying the minds of many young people because they're being TikToked into ignorance. That is very dangerous, and the best way to fight it is to play on the field where the game is being played. I find way too many people that say, I don't want to get into social media, it's a nasty sewer. Yes, it is, but that's where the game is being played. You want to win the game? Play the game where it's being played. It's being played in social media. It's being played on YouTube. It's being played on the little device called the iPhone. So take that message to where people are getting their information and just tell them the truth. And I think it's such an important message. The storytelling itself is powerful. People don't remember facts and figures and graphs and charts. I'll tell you what they remember. They remember stories. That's why, as a Christian, I look at the New Testament. Jesus was not a theologian. He was a storyteller. He was a master storyteller. Most of what I know about the New Testament, I know because of the stories that he told. He would take an object, and it would be metaphorical, that he would explain what that meant and apply it to faith. The Jewish people have the greatest story in the world, so tell it. It's a wonderful story to be told, and you have the receipts. You have the Bible. And for heaven's sakes, I would say, use it and tell it with courage and boldness. Never speak it with apology as if, well, I don't want to bring this up, but just so you know, we kind of have a place here. No, I think you say, do you realize that our history traces back 3,800 years, and we can follow the linear progress of that history from then until now? And there are prophecies throughout the entire Old Testament that say things that we are watching before our eyes. I tell people I first came to this country 52 years ago, right out of high school before I went to college in 1973. Over the 52 years that I'd been here, over 100 different times before I became ambassador, I tell people, if you want to think about this as a land of miracles, I've seen it. The prophet said that the dry bones would live again and God would put flesh on those bones. I've seen this land go from a thirsty, dusty desert into a land where there are forests and groves and vineyards and farms that are lush with vegetation. The Bible talks about that the desert will bloom. I've watched the desert bloom, literally going places just outside of Jerusalem in the Judean hillside, where 52 years ago there was nothing there except dirt and rock. And now I drive that same road and I go to, let's say, Efrat to have Shabbat dinner with a Jewish family that has invited my wife and I to come. And on the way down there, I say, I can remember when you saw nothing like you see now. Look at all those trees. Look at that farm. Look at the grove. 52 years ago, that wasn't here. I love to tell this story. There was an Israeli who bought a farm down in the Negev. He worked it really hard, put in drip irrigation, this magnificent Israeli invention. And after working it and clearing the rocks and the rubble and really just putting his heart and soul into it, he really built a farm. One day, his rabbi came out to see him. The rabbi, knowing what that land was before he bought it, said to him, "Oh, my son, what you and God have done with this land." And the farmer wiped the sweat off his brow and said, "Yeah, Rabbi, you should have seen it when God had it all by himself."
People remember stories, but they remember jokes even more. Okay, so the answer is, Doron, you and I are going to create more social media content in the city of David.
It's a go. Let's start tonight.
Let's go. That leads actually very nicely to the next question I wanted to ask you, Doron, which is, even when Israel takes upon itself to tell proudly and boldly our story, there are still those who, and they're not just on social media, and they're not just on college campuses, they're in positions of institutional authority around the world, who will do everything they can to deny it. And in your book, you speak about the pushback from UNESCO, charged with preserving and safeguarding world heritage, the pushback from UNESCO against the Jewish connection to Jerusalem. I wonder if you can just ground our discussion so we understand the problem is broader than just stupid teenagers on TikTok. Talk about some of the ways that UNESCO has actively lobbied against our attempts to tell our story of Jewish indigeneity and native connection in this land.
Well, you know, the first battle against the city of David was local. Anti-Israel groups, NGOs, primarily with European funding, the Northern Islamic Movement, which is a version of the Muslim Brotherhood, which I hope we would outlaw and take direction from President Trump and the administration. God willing, they should be successful in doing so in the next few weeks. All these institutions tried forcing Israel to give up the city of David and stop the excavations. Violence, media, Supreme Court, they lost, and they decided to take the battle. If you can't win here, the first step was not to take it to UNESCO. The first step was to take it to the White House, the Obama White House. And so I'll never forget, in September 2014, I believe it was, Ron Dermer called me in the evening. I answered Ron Dermer, just left politics, a fantastic, one of the greatest representatives of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. He called me and he said, he asked me a question, did you guys just move into a bunch of homes in the city of David? And I said, yes, matter of fact, we did. We just moved into 25 apartments. He said, was it legal? I said, Ron, you know us. Of course it was legal. We have contracts, deeds, everything. He said, I want you to know tomorrow you're going to be condemned by the White House. Wow. I said,
this was
condemned?
before your time, Ambassador.
Yes, thank you.
I said, why are we being condemned? He said, they are going to claim that you're throwing Palestinians out of their homes and they want to issue an official condemnation. We're trying to walk them down from some of the claims, but I'm telling you right now, I'm sitting next to the Prime Minister, it's irreversible. And we just told them that if they come out against the city of David, we are going to come out and defend you. And to the enormous credit of Prime Minister Netanyahu and Ron Dermer, the White House condemned us that day, President Obama condemned us, no mention of the city of David, no mention of history, no mention of archaeology. In an Arab village called Silwan, Jewish extremists throw Palestinians out of their home, right? The next day, Prime Minister Netanyahu goes on to face the nation, and he defends the city of David. Brick by brick, stone by stone. He talks about the history. He talks about the right of Arabs to buy land in Jerusalem. And the last place on earth we're going to tell a Jew he cannot buy land in Jerusalem, in the world, is in Jerusalem. And he defends us. However, we got out of that, let's say, unscathed, but we realized we have got to begin getting ready for the international onslaught against us. And here, there's a phrase in the Talmud that says that God will give you the antidote before the disease. The antidote was that we hired Zev Ornstein and Eli Aloni, two new people at the city of David. Eli Aloni opened up an entire system of fundraising, and Zev Ornstein created the incredible connections that brought the ambassador to the city of David. And along the way, he brought a congresswoman named Eliana Ross-Leitner, who was a 30-year congresswoman from Florida. Now, why is that important? Because when this woman heard that UNESCO had erased, they were preparing a resolution that called Jerusalem, called the Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif, no mention of the Temple Mount. The Western Wall was erased in Western nomenclature and called Al-Barak Plaza. Even the Muslims don't know what Al-Barak Plaza is, okay? Like, no one knows what it is. They disavowed any Jewish connection to Bethlehem. When she heard this, she gathered, not us, she gathered a joint resolution of Democrats and Republicans to go to Congress and to pass a congressional resolution in the United States battling against this. And this is what happens when your enemies fight you, like October 7th. Look at us sitting in this room. How many of our children have fought in the war? How many men and women have fought in this war? Look at the Jewish people today, how strong we are. It came out of tragedy. We rally out of tragedy. When UNESCO attacked us, the Jewish people and our friends, the congressmen, the Democrats and Republicans came together and realized if we don't defend Jerusalem, we're going to lose it. And they fought back.
Mr. Ambassador, you said earlier that Israel's greatest friend, I thought you were going to say is President Trump, is the truth. President Trump after the truth. And yet I fear that the story that you connect to of the Jewish people's ancient biblical heritage in this land is a narrative that increasingly resonates with people on the right and not on the left. And the story that Doron tells now of a bipartisan resolution defending the city of David, I wonder whether that's something that could still happen in modern America, where everything has become partisan. And so I want to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that this defense of the facts, of the truth, of history, is something that still unites America's political culture? Or is this battle for the truth and this support for Israel rooted in history something that will unfortunately become tainted by partisanship?
I think if a person looks at some of the rhetoric that's going on, not only on the left, but let me be very candid, we're seeing some of it on the right. I don't think it's widespread, but it's loud, and it has had some effect. But I'm not as panicked over the fact that you have people from all of the fringes of humankind saying disparaging things about faith in general, about the Jews specifically, or about the land of Israel. My panic is that the people of faith, be they Jew or Christian, will quit having hope and confidence in their future. And by that I mean that there needs to be an understanding that we're not operating from the point of defeat. We're operating from the point of victory. History is on our side. The truth is on our side. We need to quit apologizing as if we're losing this battle and stand confidently at the center of the field and take charge of the game and go into the end zone. I guess that's an American metaphor. Into the end zone and spike the ball.
That metaphor went completely over my head.
Okay, I thought it would be... in basketball, it would be dunking the ball, okay? You probably get that one. My point is, I find that there are a lot of people who are afraid that we're going to lose the political war, we're going to lose the PR war, and if we don't fight it, we most certainly will. But we need to understand that history, the truth, and frankly, the goodwill of decent people is on the side of those who believe that there is a God, that this world is not accidental. It was created, and it was created not by some explosion, which is an irrational view of how something of order could be created out of disorder. And we need to begin to just simply, continually, unapologetically, but faithfully let people know that there is something to believe in. I'm convinced that many young people want to believe in something that gives their life a sense of meaning and purpose. What is it? That the world blew up into reality? I don't think that that gives them meaning. But to help them to understand that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and explain how that story is still being told. It started then, but it will never end. That's how I believe we win the next generation. Not by shuffling our feet and giving sort of an aw shucks, gee, I don't know if this is really true, but I'm supposed to believe it because my parents did. No, it's boldly saying there is a valid truth, and it says that if we follow the law, the light of God, then our lives will take on a level of meaning, and our culture, our civilization, will in fact be defensible, and it will be a place in which to live. But if we don't say no to theft, to murder, to envy, to pride, then our society will fall and everyone within it will fall. We have to make the choice. Let's make the choice for a society that works, for children who grow up anticipating that their lives have purpose and meaning. We've got to take the big picture, bring it down to the small picture, but do it with confidence, authority, and with a sense of joy. That is what I believe will help to win that next generation. Because quite frankly, there's again, I have to realize a lot of my cultural references don't always translate into other nations. But years ago, when the Beatles first became very popular, someone said that more people are wanting to follow the Beatles than the Baptists because the Beatles look like they're going somewhere and the Baptists look like they're sorry they've been. What I would say is we need to be more like those who say, I want to follow those people. They look like they're going somewhere. I don't want to follow those people. They look like they're sorry they've been. Let's be the people who express with our lives that we are going somewhere because we know where we've come from. That really is the biblical message. That's the biblical story, and it's one that we should never be ashamed of and should say loud and clear.
Very beautifully put. So let's take a journey. Let's take a hike up the Pilgrimage Road. I want to give some of the members of the audience an opportunity in just a moment to ask a few questions. But I wonder if we can take a journey together up the Pilgrimage Road. Officially inaugurated, I hope will become one of the major tourism destinations, not just in this country, but in the world. And I want to ask each of you separately, what do you think the Pilgrimage Road means in terms of anchoring identity? Doron, what does it mean in terms of anchoring identity for Israeli Jews? And Ambassador, what does the Pilgrimage Road mean for anchoring identity for American Christians?
You know, the Pilgrimage Road was built, I'm convinced, divinely, intentionally, in a certain structure. The bottom of the Pilgrimage Road is the pool, which is absolutely massive, 2 Olympic-sized pools, and an incredibly wide gathering area, where we now understand that when the tribes came, both in the First Temple period and the Second Temple period, where was your meeting place? You basically said to your relative on Passover, I'll see you in a year. Let's meet back here. Where was the back here? The back here was the plaza of the Pilgrimage Road, meaning it was area for 50,000, 60,000 people to stand at a time. It was so big. But from that area, it narrows into a small road, a little larger than it is today, and then opens up to the temple where it widens out again. It's almost like a time glass, right? Like an hourglass. The reason I think it's so important is that when you walk that road, then, and I think in the next few weeks when we walk it, you will meet people from all over. at the bottom of that road. We'll gather, we'll mix, we'll have our personal space, but we'll see other people. When you journey up that road shoulder to shoulder, and you bump shoulders, men and women, Jews, Christians, Hindus, everyone taking a journey towards a temple that stands on top of Mount Moriah that Abraham saw 3,000 years ago, 3,800 years ago, and you experience it as a people, when that opens back up and allows you in the gates of the temple, I think we'll be bonded, truly unified. I agree with the ambassador so much, so clearly. He said it so clearly about this message of accepting and not being afraid and understanding how God created creation. That is the ultimate bonding. And I think the road, just in the way it's physically built, forces you to be shoulder to shoulder as you walk up that. It's greater than the archaeology. Yes, you're walking on the original stones. Yes, they've been worn smooth by the leather sandals of the people who walked there. Yes, we have the burning on the road from the destruction of the homes. But to have that journey alone, that's interesting. It's like meditation. It's incredible. But to have it with people from around the world, I don't know if there's another place like that.
That's a very powerful description, and I would simply say that as a Christian, knowing that Jesus walked that very road, he was Jewish, but he went to the temple, and that he walked that road, and that I now, 2,000 years later, can walk that very path. It's not that it might have been here, but it may have been over there. It could have been somewhere else, but this is one of those places that is, without any doubt, is the authentic place, that pilgrimage road. That's why it's so significant. And to uncover it after 2,000 years of history gives one not simply a feeling of, okay, this is really historic. I don't know how you walk that road, whether you're Jewish or Christian, and how you cannot feel emotionally and spiritually an overwhelming awe and wonder that you are touching in the very place that the people of ancient times walked so they could go to the Temple Mount and worship, and that they could go and validate their faith and go and know that all these many years later, that same path they took, we too are taking. And it is a path not just to a stone, it is a pathway to meet God, which is really what the temple was all about. It's where man and God got together to meet, to cancel the sin. I mean, that's still what man needs to do, isn't it? To meet God, to have his sin canceled. What better way to prepare oneself for that encounter than to walk that pilgrim road, come out from the depths of the earth to the temple area, and then begin to understand that just as people have done all of these many centuries, we now can once again find a God who wants to meet us and to redeem us. That's, to me, pretty powerful.
And I think if we're extending the sporting metaphors, then that answer is a slam dunk. We have some time to take some questions from the audience. I would just request that you keep it a question and not a speech. Yes, sir, you at the front.
As a former hostage, I was held hostage by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine 55 years ago in Jordan, in the Black September. I was hijacked on TWA to Jordan. I was there for a week. And I've studied over the last 55 years history, basically observing what has happened. And I agree, I'm also a PhD in computers, so I agree with you that the modern media is destroying the youth, not only of Israel, the United States, but the world. But one other observation I have is that Israel has been fighting wars since 55 years ago, but they've never been allowed to win. They've never been allowed to defeat their enemies, whether it was 1967, it was 1973, Hamas, even recently. Israel was on the verge of destroying Hamas, and it was stopped. Hezbollah, it was stopped. Do you think that the fact that Israel is not allowed to finish the job gives Palestinians hope that eventually the world will stop Israel even sooner and allow them to destroy us.
I would just remind you that this is a land of miracles, and it's always been that. It always will be. I tell my friends back home, if you live in this land and do not see the hand of God performing miracles every day, I believe it takes more faith to deny the miracle than it does to accept the miracle. And I would simply say that when God said that this is his land and he will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel, I'm just going to go with what he said. And I believe that no matter who raises his or her hand against the land and against the people, they will find themselves coming up short every time. And I hope that my own blessed, beloved United States of America always stands with Israel, because I believe to do so is to stand with our own heritage, history, culture, and let me say, it's to stand with our own future. And so I'm not concerned that somebody will destroy Israel, because I don't believe that anyone has the power to overcome the hand of God that will preserve Israel.
Doron, would you like to address that question with your former IDF spokesperson hat on?
I think I'm going to let the ambassador, having handled that one, but I will just say that.
Because, I mean, the hand of God is a pretty good secret.
That is. I don't think that that I can battle that. But the one thing
Arrow 3, Iron Dome, hand of God.
The one thing I will say is that if the opportunity arises, we all know that Israelis will quickly run to the battlefield to do it if we need to do it. And I think that we shouldn't take that for granted. It's been 2 years of war. It's been hundreds of days of serving, time away from families, businesses have failed, people have had a hard time, people have died, cherished loved ones have died. Yet if Israel is called to action, if we need to be, if that's the decision, we will go. And I think after 2,000 years of sitting in the ghetto, in the galut, not having weapons, not being able to defend ourselves, we know, and we are an independent nation at the end of the day, Eylon, and I think that America hopefully also understands that, but we understand that. Ultimately speaking, we will do what we need to do to survive as a people.
Do we have another question? Perhaps someone, gentleman there in the middle of the auditorium.
We had a Jewish senator, Ben Card, who's been silent, known as a famous supporter of the state of Israel and Jewish causes. What can we do to get these people to speak out and help to tell the Israeli story?
They throw the hard ones at me, I guess. Thanks a lot. I would somewhat dispute the premise in that I do see people standing with Israel. I saw 1,000 pastors here last week. They didn't have to come. They took time away at one of the busiest seasons for churches in the entire calendar year. And they came because they wanted to stand with Israel. I do see the people who are silent, and that grieves me. When I was in high school, my speech teacher told us, silence is agreement. If you see something or you hear something, and it is evil and it is wrong, and you say nothing and you do nothing, then you have agreed with it. And he said that the whole point of being in speech class, which I was 16 years old, but it still sticks with me, silence is agreement. And unless you want to agree with something evil, you are required to do something and to say something. And I do see people who are saying it and doing it. Do we need more? You bet we do. And when we don't see it and we see cowardice, especially in those who ought to be vocal, then I think we have not just a right, but we have a responsibility to call them out and ask them why. Why is your voice still? Why are you not speaking out against evil? Do you not know the consequences historically when people see that which is wrong and they say nothing and do nothing? Edmund Burke said it best, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And in the lead up to the Holocaust and throughout the Holocaust, millions of people were murdered because others looked the other way and determined that it would be very costly if they said something. What they failed to understand was that the greatest cost of all is not when we speak up, even if we pay the price for it. It's when we don't speak up, and our children and our grandchildren pay the price for it. And we have to remind people that the only brief period of time that we are here on this earth matters not if we don't have the courage to fight for that which is true, that which is right, and that which is worth saving and preserving. That's what I would say.
Doron?
Next time I think I'm going to answer first, because following the ambassador is really difficult. I will just say this, that we know that silence even led to October 7th. There were people that saw what was happening. Even within the army itself, there was silence. Silence leads to destruction. It immediately leads to destruction in Israel because our enemies are so close to us, which is why in Israel we praise, or now repraise again, the idea that we're supposed to call out everything we see. However, there's a different message in answer to this gentleman's question regarding, I think, the United States of America. And that falls in American Jewry. We do our best here. We need to be on social media and do more and more. But I think there's a crossroads for American Jewry. I think that they are being attacked and they don't feel the safety we feel in Israel, where we know that if something happens in Israel, 10 people are going to run to help you. In America, I don't think they see that. I've seen videos where people have been attacked and people just keep walking. You know, there's real fear. American Jewry has got to transform. This is a transformational moment for them. You can either stick your head deeper and deeper in the earth, try to hide, try to blend in, try to tuck that Jewish star. I'll never forget, there was a Jewish family that came here after October 7th. They said to me, we're still wearing our Jewish stars, but tucked inside. And I felt for them because they feel like they're battling because they've got a Jewish star on it all. But this is the time, take out that Jewish star, take out your Bible, go to every protest and stand strong, talk about your right to the state of Israel and understand, and maybe this is the issue. You're standing for Israel, standing for what it is to be a Jew in the United States of America, because if they are considered to be a people without a land, then they'll just disappear. It's happened in every time throughout history. Standing strong for Israel, standing strong for Judaism, holding your head up high is what's going to preserve that community for the future. And if they hide, I think they're going to disintegrate, either out of fear or because it won't be worth it anymore. Their children are watching them. I often tell them when they ask me, your children are watching how you respond right now. You're 45 years old, you've got 2 kids in school. How are you responding to this threat? Because they're going to face perhaps bigger threats. And so I think it's really time that that community takes a stand and has the courage that the ambassador is talking about.
If silence leads to destruction, I think we're noisy enough that we should be fine. Any more questions from the audience? Over here. Okay, there's a gentleman standing up who seems very enthusiastic. Yes, sir.
I would like to ask the ambassador to invite our best friend, the President of the United States, to visit the city of David, and maybe it's going to change his view about his friend Doron. Thank you.
Ambassador, perhaps might we see President Donald Trump visiting the city of David, and might that cause a change in America's relations with Turkey?
Well, I certainly would love to see the president visit the city of David. No president in history, no president, not even close, has ever done as much to show the support, not just of the president, but of the American people to the Jewish people and to Israel as Donald Trump has. And I'm proud to serve him and the United States. So I would love for him to come. I think he would be overwhelmed. I honestly hoped that he would have come when the ceremony on September the 15th came, but I was even happier when he came a month later and was able to come on the day that all of the living hostages and many of the deceased hostages came out of captivity. And I pray that the last one comes out within the next 24 to 48 hours, and that is a chapter forever behind us.
Doron, if just riffing off this gentleman's question, if you have the honor of guiding President Trump around the city of David, but he has 10 minutes and you can only show him one artifact, what would it be?
That's actually a very easy question. I'm glad you came to me first. The very first place and the only place I would take the president is into the Olive Garden, which is new, show him a wall in which there is embedded in that wall a plaque written in English and in Hebrew saying that the first American heritage site in the state of Israel is the city of David, because Donald Trump, after UNESCO, tried to pull the rug out from under the Jewish people in the city of David and in Hebron and in Bethlehem, and called us foreigners in our land by erasing our history. He officially declared the city of David to be the very first heritage site in the state of Israel. Nothing more than for him to see that he is not only seeing history around him, he is actually making history. He is placing a stamp like Cyrus the Great. There is no other president that has even come close, as the ambassador said, and it's to give us hope. Like the ambassador said, you see that sign, I start every tour with that sign, because that is the courage for the future. These are not just a bunch of stones. Otherwise, they're a bunch of stones. They tell a story, they don't tell a story. If we're not acting on them, projecting to the future, then we're missing the whole point. And that really is speaking the words, that is letting the stone speak what the president did, and that's what he needs to see.
Let's take one more question, and then I'm aware the ambassador has a prior engagement. Yes, you, sir, in the front.
I'm honored and proud to say that I've known Doron from the IDF days and up to the earliest days of City of David. Of course, the ambassador, too, have had the honor of long relationship. And how can we somehow combat the partisanship which has come into the narrative here, which we're trying to portray? How can we overcome this partisanship in something which should be clearly a bipartisan, totally have everyone on board with our narrative?
Excellent question, Danny. I think the simple answer is that I've been swimming in the political waters for quite some time. You can look at me and tell I'm pretty old. So here's what I've learned. The political pendulum swings from time to time. And sometimes it swings to the right, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the far right, sometimes to the far left. But there comes a point at which when people realize that the most extreme positions lead to division, polarization, and ultimately to failure, there is always a return to rational and pragmatic understanding that there has to be a purpose of the political world to lead us to a solution, not just to hot-headed anger. So when I see the extremes, and right now in America we're seeing some really crazy extremes on the left. What happened in New York City in that election is disturbing. But if he carries out his plans for socialism, there will be people who will say, what on earth have we done? And so I'm not long-term, short-term, I'm worried about it. Long-term, I've watched this throughout my lifetime. I've seen the pendulum swing back and forth. And most of the time in a democracy, there is a self-correcting mechanism, and it's called the people. And when the people get sick of the results they get from extremism, they tend to wake up and change the narrative, and they're the only ones who can do it. And that's the genius and the brilliance of a democracy, is that the power ultimately is with the people. As long as they're content with the insanity, they'll continue to have it. But insanity does not inspire people to their best. And there comes a point when people wake up and say, this isn't working. And that's when we'll see a return to a common sense form of governing ourselves. So it's not the politicians that we have to worry about. We have to worry about each other. When we wake up, see the light, and say, these people, they're not representing us, they're not serving us, and they're not helping us. So we're going to change it. Because ultimately, you have that power in Israel, you're a democracy. We have that power in the United States. We're a democracy. And at some point, the people will raise up, speak up, and they will vote differently. I have to believe that.
And democracy is definitely the best form of government in this region too, not benevolent monarchy. On that note, thank you very much, Ambassador Huckabee. I'm just aware with an eye on the watch that the ambassador has another engagement, so just before we wrap up, we're going to let you take your leave. Thank you very much for coming and honoring us with your presence today. Thank you. Okay, I want to invite to the stage Rotem Sala, the publisher of Sela Meir, who has published the Hebrew edition of When the Stones Speak. תנו לאבנים לדבר. רותם, the stage is yours.
אני קודם כל אדבר בעברית, כיוון שאני המוציא לאור העברי של תנו לאבנים לדבר, הספר של דורון, שעוסק בחלק מהנושאים שאנחנו עסקנו בהם בערב הזה. בשנתיים האחרונות, המציאות הישראלית הייתה מאוד גשמית. אם הסתכלנו על דברים כמו כוח ועוצמה, אז מה שעשינו זה לספור טילים, איראנים, כמות מיירטים שיש לנו, שטחים, משלוחי נשק, וזה היה הגיוני, כי בסופו של דבר יש לנו צורך, והצורך היה להגן על החיים עצמם, אבל שהאבק ישכב, הוא ישכב, הוא כבר שוקע, אז אנחנו נצטרך כאומה ויחידים, אנחנו נצטרך להפנות מבט למשהו שהוא לא פחות מסוכן מהקונספציות שאחזנו בהם לפני השביעי באוקטובר, הקונספציות הצבאיות, וזה חוסר שימת הלב שלנו לשאלות, לשורש, לשאלות של זהות. אנחנו נצטרך להתחבר לעיר דוד, להיסטוריה שלנו, לשאול אנחנו, בשבילנו, בשביל ילדינו, בשביל האומה שלנו, מאיפה באנו, מדוע אנחנו פה, מדוע אנחנו ראוי שנלחם, ראוי שנלחמנו, ואנחנו נצטרך לפתח גם תפיסה של ביטחון לאומי היסטורי, שבו אנחנו לא נלחמים רק בכלי נשק ובעוצמה שאפשר לבוא ולעמוד בצורה חומרית, אלא גם עומדים על זכותנו, וזו הסיבה שיש לנו את הזכות להוציא את תנו לאבנים לדבר של דורון שפילמן, שחושף לא רק את הממצאים של עיר דוד. אני בטוח שמי מכם שלא ראה אותם ומי מכם שלא היה שם בטח יזדמן לשם בשבועות, בחודשים הקרובים, אלא מה שמדהים לא פחות זה שהספר חושף את המאבק האדיר שמאמצע המאה ה-19 ועד ימינו אנו, הימים שבהם דורון שימש בעיר דוד ונלחם את המלחמות האלה, המאמץ האדיר שנעשה כדי שהממצאים האלה יישארו מתחת לאדמה, שלא יודו מים, שלא יכירו בהם, שלא יראו אותם, שהם בסופו של דבר לא ישחקו תפקיד בהיסטוריה שלנו ועל בימת העולם. והדבר הזה צועק יותר מכל, והדבר הזה אני חייב להגיד שמתי שקראתי את הספר לראשונה באנגלית, גייס אותי, ואני בטוח שכמו הערב הזה הוא יגייס אתכם. אתם מוזמנים לרכוש את תנו לאבנים לדבר, שהושק החודש בעברית, פה במוזיאון, בחנות המוזיאון, ותודה רבה לכם שהגעתם, ושוב, תודה לך דורון שכתב על הספר הזה, ובהצלחה.